Okay, well, I'm going to have two parts of this. One is Bansky, and this is the first one. This will be about the first hour. And Bansky is a British graffiti artist who has worldwide recognition. And as you'll see, he has political views and he also has a lot of generosity. He's also very rich. But let me review a few other things before we get to the Bansky thing. It's primarily about Bansky, but it's not 100%. What's the definition of graffiti? Well, writing or drawing scribbled, scratched, or sprayed illicitly on a wall or other surface in a public place. And certainly we've all seen a lot of that, and actually a lot of it's kind of entertaining. Clearly, here's some graffiti on this closed up place. Here's just some random graffiti, nothing particularly characteristic about it. Just makes it easy. If you have a spray can, you can make a mess no matter what. Don't even have to have much talent at all. Portland takes graffiti removal pretty seriously. So here you can go and find out about how to get rid of graffiti. Fill in the form and they'll come and take care of it. I guess if it's significant enough or it's in the right place. But there's all of this stuff that's easily available. On the other hand, there are a lot of shops that want to have things on their wall, just as a very pretty picture and advertising things, just to brighten up the downtown a little bit. So they have a lot of very good pictures put on the side of the wall. Here's some wall art at Cherrywood where we are. And I think that's very bright and colorful. I've seen similar things in restaurants and other places. It's just kind of neat to see this stuff on the wall. Now, if we want to talk about early graffiti, here we go. This guy back in the cave time knows enough to sprinkle mud on himself, swing across and splat into the wall. And I guess we call that the first selfie. Or do you want to call it wall art? Your choice. And here's another one. I mean, there's this more wall art. Is this graffiti or is this, you know, an opinion? I liked his earlier stuff better. Well, okay, to each their own. So anyhow, we're going to move along. And let me just show you some of the graffiti here. And this clearly is graffiti. It's in places that it's not too bothersome, I imagine. But look at the quality of it. It's not just random things around, but you'll see that all these A's are very carefully and explicitly outlined with all the detail in here. And that's all very well done. So somebody that knew what he was doing with a spray can really did a good job there, if you don't mind the graffiti. Let's talk a little bit about some other things pretty much related to graffiti. And here we see this guy that looks like he's standing on top of the world. Well, that's one view of life. But if we take a different view, you see it's all in perception. And there's a lot of really neat things done with that. And I want to show you a couple of them because I was really entranced by some of these things. Having seen the one you saw before, you know that the man and the woman are quite far apart. And she's not really little. She's a full-size person. She's just pretty far away. And this guy up here is the guy that puts these things on the sidewalks big time. I'm sure he gets paid for that also. Clearly, she looks like she's way back there and he's just in the right place to put his hand. And you know that this is laid out flat on the street, but it really looks pretty cool the way that it's set up there. It really looks three-dimensional. And then, of course, he's got this pipe, and he took that pipe and took advantage of that to put this thing around and make it look like it could go down to a maypole down here below. I was really fascinated with this. I thought it's really cool stuff. I would imagine that people walking along the street are careful not to trip over this one here or step into the sand that's in this one. Of course, it's all flat. That's just painted on the surface. Really look cool, I think. And here's several little examples. They take a grate like here, and that's all flat. That's not three-dimensional. But this cute little guy is pulling in his waffle material, and this fish is looking at this mouse. I mean, there's just so many clever things here. This is all flat work, but it's so clever, I think, that I just had to show it to you because it's part of the graffiti. And you walk around town, and this I found on a sidewalk near us, and I thought, gee, who's making that's kind of stupid graffiti? It's not even very clever or very, you know, but it's not really graffiti. It's actually PGE is laying out the electrical power lines from this pole over here, and it even shows where it points across into the lawn. So graffiti is everywhere. Sometimes it's not really graffiti, it's worthwhile. I thought I'd show you a couple other cute things. It looks like he's going through the, it's all flat. Now they took advantage, this guy up here is at a light post and he's sitting around it and takes advantage of that to continue that light post as a drawing down in this pencil for this gremlin here making some kind of a sketch on the pavement. And you'll see that Banksy also takes advantage of whatever happens to be in the background, what they're permanently, to add to his graffiti and to enlighten it and give some more substance to it. This is just a wall painting replica of Pablo Picasso. Actually, this is over in Spain. People in other countries do all this stuff too. It's not all that unusual. This I thought is another kind of neat thing. This looked like this place is falling down, but it turns out that that's painted on the side by this guy who goes around and does this art to trick your eyes. And here's another one. I think this is, it's all flat. It's just so well done. And this gal that's sitting here looking at, she's just amazed with it. Actually, she's part of the painting. She's not a real person. Got you fooled, huh? Yeah, these things are so cool. It's so much fun putting these things together because I come across stuff like that. And it's just absolutely amazing. It looks like this is ready to be demolished, but it's a flat painting. It's just, I love it. It's just fun. And then, of course, let's come back to a little bit more real graffiti. A lot of it has political connotations, of course, also. You may recognize this guy here. He looks to me like Attorney General William Barr. So somebody gave me Mickey Mouse ears, didn't think too highly of him, I guess. And certainly when they put him in the Ku Klux Klan, they certainly didn't think it. They think he's a racist, homophobe, moron, and they crossed out as governor. So I don't know, I guess they have him pegged pretty well in their opinion. Now this is more what graffiti looks like. And actually I went on YouTube and I saw somebody do something very similar to this up here. I mean, it really is, and if you go close, it's really well done. The lines are clear cut. They do this freehand, and it's just amazing what these people do. They might sketch out something to get the scale and where they're going to put the letters and so on, but then they do it freehand, and it just absolutely boggles the mind. And look at all this. I mean, it looks like somebody paid to have this done because it fits in very well with the motif of this house here and so on. These others are clearly just because somebody wanted to make their mark on a wall. And the scale of these things, see these people down here, somebody had to put up some scaffolding to put this on. Well, that's true for some of the other stuff I showed you earlier also. Don't tolerate unwanted graffiti though, of course. You really want to make sure you don't do that. And sometimes you put all that effort into it and you put up a nice wall and so on, and then its time has come, so it's gone. One of the comments I thought was interesting that I came across is that patterns discourage graffiti. So that's why you see all of these stations now decorated with these patterns. It used to be they were covered with graffiti. You'll notice that this flat, clear surface up here has graffiti on it that's then been covered up. But in the process, there's no graffiti here. And you'll find that consistently. I haven't seen any of these places, now I haven't checked them all, but I haven't seen any of these places where there's stuff on it at the stops, and they have a pattern and there's no graffiti there. Here's another one. I just had to show you another one of these also. He really looks kind of terrified, and I guess I would be too if I saw something like that. But maybe he can learn to fly with Batman and Robin. I don't know. I love this stuff. And these women have taken advantage of this really neat thing to put themselves in a very desperate straits for some hero to come and collect them before they go over the waterfall. Of course, it's all just a flat street, but I find it pretty neat. And of course, it's not just United States. Graffiti's around the world. This one's the Berlin Wall graffiti. See, here's the top of the wall. It's rounded, so people have trouble getting a hold of it. It's political, a lot of political graffiti. Here's the Berlin Wall graffiti. It's political. Notice this guy coming through the wall up here, indication of that. And of course, Adenauer and Honecker, East and West German heads, down here kissing each other. Somebody put that up with a comment, and that's people admiring that. Here's just a mural in Portland that was put up fairly recently with George Floyd. This is the Apple store, so I imagine that they actually paid up, have that put up there. Apple is very politically oriented for the most part. And also it's international. These other guys do graffiti. They probably get paid for this because it's so nicely done. I thought it's neat the way that she reaches through the wall here and has a grab on this post and the balconies. That's kind of neat. These are the two that do this kind of stuff, and they do very nice work. Okay, now we've had a look at some street art graffiti. Let's take a look at Bansky material. Nobody knows who Bansky is. He's clearly got a lot of money. He's a very clever guy and a very gifted artist, in my opinion. Is it street art or is it really fine art? And it really is worth millions of dollars, as you'll find out. I got most of my information in this DVD, Exit Through the Gift Shop, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. The guy that put this together he owns a gift shop, I think in California, and he got enamored with graffiti, and especially with graffiti in his own area, and he started doing graffiti himself, and then he got tied in with Bansky. He got chasing that. He went over to England, and I guess he now knows Bansky, who he is, which is the big, deep secret. But anyhow, with the help of a couple of people, he put together this DVD, which is really kind of fun to watch. And then there's this other book, Bansky in New York. These are both from the public library, so you can put yourself in line to get those. And I got a lot of material out of this, Bansky in New York. Bansky has been to the United States several times, in Los Angeles, New Orleans, but he spent a month of October in New York City, and every day he would put graffiti someplace in the New York City area. And he never said where it was, so people, after they found out, started going on a hunt for this stuff. And you'll see some clever stuff, and then whenever somebody would find something, they put it on the internet so people would know where it was, and then you'd start getting lots of crowds to go there. But let's start back with some fundamental things about Bansky. Here's one of his. This one is called Love is in the Air. He's about to throw this thing of flowers to somebody, so love is in the air, I guess is the thing. But, whoops, yeah, okay. Oh yeah, I do have down here. Notice that that sold for $248,000 back in June of 2013. So this is not your standard kind of graffiti. He's definitely upscale. Here's a fairly typical thing for Bansky. The little girl with a red balloon, in this case, a heart-shaped balloon. And it's kind of neat. And that became such a thing. He had several of those around in England that then, being clever, he actually put a girl, of course a dummy, hanging on a balloon and set her loose over in England. And she's climbing and climbing. And of course, everybody really turned around, and she's a photographic object. I mean, people recognize this at this point. He's so well known. And the kind of gimmicks he does, it's just on and on, it's endless. Here's another one of his typical graffiti. It's typically simple like this, and some simplistic thing, kind of clever, shows in a different sort of backward place very often, most often, but it's kind of fun to look at these things. Is he genius with a spray can? He is a genius with a spray can, but is it art? That's one of the questions everybody's asking. So you might not keep that in the back of your mind, but I think it's art. It's kind of humorous sometimes, but it's art. He expands just so much, and he has a heart as well as art. This was done at a kid's school that was very interested in him. And it turns out in June 16, Bansky painted this mural for students at a primary school in his hometown, Bristol, England. Students at school had named a house at their school for him, and he surprised them with a mural when they returned from a holiday break. So this is kind of neat for a side of a kid's school. That's pretty clever, I think. And again, political stuff. These crows over here, migrants not welcome. Now remember, this is Britain. Go back to Africa. Keep our worms. Keep off our worms. So they don't want these guys participating, these gad-about birds taking their worms. In October 2014, it was destroyed by the Council of Clacton-on-Sea, England. They received complaints that it was offensive. I guess not everybody likes political comment. Here's another typical kind of thing for Bansky in London, 2006. They happen to take a picture when this guy is walking his dog past. It almost implies that she's taken his poo and pushing it back underneath the curtain. But that's all flat art, of course. There's nothing really three-dimensional about that. He just chooses a place and then goes and does his thing. Political again. This is the flag of the European Union. And this guy is all flat. I mean, he's just flat against the wall, shadow and everything. But he's seeing where England is starting to chip and get out of the European Union. So another political comment. This is one that's interesting too. Clever idea where he has this wall, and on one side you're burning trash, and the smoke brings up the ashes, and they drift around the corner, and there's snowflakes on this guy's. Remember as a kid, you used to stick your tongue out and try to catch a snowflake on your tongue? And of course, his sled is down here on the side. The art appeared in Wales, UK, December 2018. The rumored Bansky artwork on a garage, allowing a child open arms to playing what he appears to be with a sledge at his side, but the other side wall reveals it's ash from the rubbish bin on fire. Graffiti has appeared on a garage at Port Talbot, and it's rumored to be by the anonymous street artist Bansky. This festive artwork shows a child with open arms. You can see that they've put a fence over here so that people wouldn't come in and mess it up with other graffiti. And we'll see later that that's really one of the problems that is always there. Also, the fact that Bansky has such a reputation and he is able to get a lot of money for his things means that people take this stuff seriously. And a lot of people not only show up and take a look at it, but they protect it so that nobody's going to mess it up. And then to really make sure, they put these plastic panels over it and clubbed it all in. And then to really make sure, they picked it up and carried it away and put it in storage someplace for self-keeping. Now, who's going to have the financial benefit of that, I don't know. But you'll see that some people have a lot of financial benefit for a lot of this kind of stuff that he has. Here's another Bansky thing. This is the guy that is the Greg Fox. He's on the Islington Council. And you'll see that that Bansky takes advantage of this pipe running up the side, and also with the little electrical connection there, to make that as a flagpole with a flag out. And graffiti has already made it up there and started screwing things up. And that's one of the reasons they put this plastic protection over this, so that nobody's going to be able to actually bother the graffiti that was put there by Banksy. But see, all you have to do is wait a couple of days and somebody's going to mess it up. Now, they did straighten the flag out up above with some things, so that's maybe not quite so bad. This is one of the pictures of Banksy. You can see he's not exactly going to reveal who he is. He's got a very busy workshop. He's got a lot of stuff, clearly a talented artist. Made a lot of millions from his art in one way, or publishing, or whatever it is. Nobody knows who he is, so they don't really know exactly where his money is, but he's clearly a talented artist. And here, this guy, I'm not sure I want to go to him for tourist information, but some of this stuff is actually pretty large, as you see on the side of this building. And here's one of the commentators from the TV channel, which is where I got this picture from. And she's talking about this new Bansky thing on the side of the building. And look a little closer, and there's no such thing as good publicity. Well, that's a little different. And he has a couple of them like that. I love New York. I don't know whether this is in New York or not, but anyhow, he's going to go to New York. I don't know if they have those kind of one-way signs in Britain or not. One of the other things, it's not just outside. He's a very clever guy, so he has a lot of ideas. And, you know, why shouldn't talent like this be hung in the galleries like all the other stuff that, you know, these old stuff that are out of date kinds of things, you know, Renoir and stuff like that. So why shouldn't he be able to put his own stuff in there? And sure enough, that's exactly what he does. Now, his stuff is maybe a little different than you might see from the other folks, because you see some graffiti behind here on this wall. And of course, this person has a gas mask, and you know, there's some other stuff that's kind of weird, but he does put this stuff up here. And so here's a couple of the different styles of things he puts into the galleries. And this, of course, is the real Water Lily Pond by Claude Monet, but this one is a typical modernization of that with all these trash baskets being thrown into the water underneath the pond, which wouldn't surprise me to actually happen in these days. And of course, everybody's gone into a museum and they've said exit through the gift shop, but they don't usually put it on top of one of their paintings. And Home Sweet Home is a thing that everybody has seen some picture of, but they don't usually title it right over the picture itself. So it's a little bit creative. And notice, these are in art galleries. Now, how long they let them there, I really have no idea, but it's something. He can be pretty political internationally also. So let's go down to Israel, and you can see the wall here is separating the Israelis and Palestine and so on. And he puts up some other things. Here's this girl with her balloons, and she's going to go and float over the wall, as we saw before with the red balloon. And here, of course, somebody's still doing this, so they mess up the head so you can't recognize who it might be. Here's another one. They're going to put a zipper cut along this line for the wall. But here's a hole. And as a matter of fact, you get to the other side, you might even get to southern breezes and ocean air. And here are these little kids with their sand bucket, perhaps dreaming of stuff like that. The UK graffiti artist tags walls. And here's another wall that was on the side of it. That was on August 10th, 2015 in the Jerusalem Post. So this is down in that area. And here's another one where there's a hole in the wall and these kids are walking through it. West Banksy, a little bit of a twist. Mystery artist paints wall. And so there's the picture that they have. So yes, he is a rather political person. Here's another. We've seen these swings. You've probably done it as a kid at the amusement park. Swung around with these high poles. And here's an idea of what they could do with one of the towers that overlooks the wall between the two states. I don't know where this came from, but I'm sure the telephone boxes in Britain have a special meaning to the Brits, and we'll see a couple of them here. It's hard to tell from here, but this is a pickaxe going into this, and this is blood dripping along the side, presumably, of what this is. And here we see him actually making this. So he's getting some help. He's got to get one of these boxes, and then he's got to cut it in half or cut it in an angle like this, so that then he can turn around and weld it together so that he has something to put out on the street. And this is pretty significant. Those are metal heavy things, so it takes some significance, help to be able to do that. And he has a couple of them. And this is the one that I showed you before with the blood down the side and the pickaxe in the side. And here's one that's just been pushed down into the ground with rubble put around the side of it. He really makes a statement with these things. I'm not sure what the statement is, but it's clearly not something you're going to walk by without noticing. In May 14, 2010, directed by Bansky, and with Bansky, Mr. Brainwash, Space Invader, Deborah Gouda, these are all pseudonyms. Like Bansky is a unknown name of an unknown person. Mr. Brainwash, we know who Brainwash is. I'll show you in a minute. Space Invader and Deborah, these are all pseudonyms of a lot of street artists that have a real reputation and are well known. Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, gives that DVD Exit Through the Gift Shop a 9.4, which is pretty good. For most movies don't make it anywhere close to that. This is about the movie. This is Steve Larzaris, Bansky's former spokesman. And this fellow is a gift shop owner. I think he's in California. And he enjoyed getting into graffiti and then into Bansky stuff, but he's the guy that actually put together the DVD. And you'll see him in the DVD quite a bit and some of his graffiti and so on. And it's really quite an entertaining and fun kind of thing to look at. So let's talk now about the time I mentioned before about Bansky in New York for October of 2013. He placed an image each day of October in an unknown until discovered location. And this is one of the things he did. This is October 1st in Chinatown. So here you have two boys sitting on top of each other with this sign. Now that's a real sign that was on the side, but they put this, the graffiti is these boys coming up, and then of course the spray can up here underneath this is part of the whole message. And it turns out that that's a little close-up of it. Graffiti is a crime. Now that's a metal sign that's there. Oops. And it turns out that I didn't put it in this, but somebody then stole that sign and put up a different sign there. Then all of the boys on top of each other, that was completely whited out, and it was a total disaster. Here's another one. I wasn't able to find a thing, or I didn't get it off soon enough, but this graffiti was not on the wall like that before. This dog with his fire plug, "You complete me." That was on October 3rd. And you can see up here is the indication somebody saw that. So on October 3rd, they put it on the internet so that people could go and admire this graffiti by Bansky. So people come and they take pictures of it. And you'll notice that there's additional graffiti added here. That's not in the previous picture. See, it's not there. So somebody put that graffiti there, and some other of this stuff also. These tags and so on are just, they were not there before. People come and mess around. This one was not there before. Do not enter. Uh-oh. I don't think I want to enter with a monster like that behind. The Red Hook neighborhood of Brooklyn, October 7th. And people come along and they put themselves into the picture and get a nice picture. And of course, that's kind of a neat, clean picture now. But then a couple of days later, when some woman is doing that, they've already put graffiti on here, and they've actually put graffiti over the balloon itself. It's really unfortunate people do that, but that's the attitude some graffiti artists have. Not sure when this was put in. I wasn't able to find the date on it, but it's a comment that he has about the homeless. And here is a woman having her picture taken. Just some more stuff. Follow your dreams, cancel. This is a Boston drawing. I'm not sure why I have that in there, but it just is an appropriate one to have, I guess, with this, things in the United States. Okay, now we're back to New York. This is October 10th. And you'll notice that this is where the graffiti goes. You see this guy? He's been put there by Bansky. Now this is all a put-up job because they don't put signposts like this, "Don't park at any time," back against the wall. He did that because he didn't want to make a mess of things. It's really out by the curb where you're parking otherwise. So anyhow, this is another one. This is a truck that he filled with all these stuffed animals. And it goes around through the butchering section of New York. I guess there's a marketing, or I forget what it would be called, but a section of New York particularly with a lot of butcher shops and where they do a lot of slaughtering and so on. And these are animated. So they make sounds, they bleat, their heads move. And this truck drives around from location to location. It's really kind of neat. And that was done on October 11th. Circulated in the meatpacking district. This is another one that was kind of interesting because this is a wall in front, and then there's a space, and then there's this other wall that he actually painted this priest on. And here's one of the women that came up, and she's getting ready to give confession, I guess, because she's now kneeling and praying. One of the things that was amazing was that a lot of his street art showed up one day in New York City on October 13th. And it turned out, who knew, that these are original signed things by Bansky. The stunt was revealed the next day. Each piece originally purchased for $60 is now valued at approximately $250,000. Wouldn't you love to have gone down and gotten one of them? What we do in life echoes in eternity. Well, that's going to be erased pretty soon, I guess. What we do in life may or may not echo in eternity. And here's another one that's kind of neat. October 17th. And he took advantage of this part that was already there on the side of this building. And he added his little Asian bridge with the woman with the fan and the sun shield umbrella and a bonsai type little tree down here. And really kind of neat detail put on this brick wall. But then here come the graffiti artists, and they just don't give a damn. They just go ahead and do things. And look, this is the graffiti artist, and this guy is amazed with what he's doing. And this guy too is almost going to stop him. I mean, they don't like that. And then a little bit later, these guys are in there trying to clean up the spray that the graffiti artist. So Bansky's stuff is really respected, and the fact these graffiti guys come around and diss it is not appreciated by most people, I think. Here's another one that's kind of clever. It takes advantage of this water thing and has the bell up on top on the October 20th. And of course, you gotta do something about that. He takes advantage of what's already there. And then other people come, and what a neat idea to have her picture taken that way. And of course, the guys are a little crazier, but they get into the act also. And here, ghetto for life. And of course, here's the guy, the servant, obviously, the butler holding his cans of paint for him. So ghetto isn't necessarily for life. I'm not sure exactly how to interpret that, but everybody brings their own to it. And here's another one. Main entrance to Larry Flint's Hustler Club in New York's Hell's Kitchen in October 24th. And there was a complaint made about that. I think I might have it coming up soon. That, you know, Bansky's stuff is worth so much. Why would they give the hustler, this guy, Larry Flint, has millions and millions of dollars already, and he's going to be able to take this metal door and sell it for how many hundred thousands of dollars, who knows. So it really is. But somebody here getting into the act again. Passerby having her picture taken. This is the thing I already told you about. This is Larry Flint. And they were complaining about the fact that they put it on his door and he's going to be able to make a lot of money out of it. It's not really quite the right way to go with things. Here's another one that's maybe interesting. I guess you would see that a guy like this wouldn't have a name. He'd have a serial number like that. Worked for me, October 28th. And here's another one. This is a goodwill type thing in New York City. Housing Works, a very worthy charity. And on October 29th, here's a picture of this by itself. Well, we'll see a better picture of that. Here's what it was originally. And then Banksy added this to it. And apparently this reflects back on the way, if you look at some of the trials that they had in Germany at the end, they were very placid and, you know, they were really not hectic. I don't know how the rationalization fits in, but there's some, you can find stuff on the internet that kind of tries to interpret it. But anyhow, this ended up selling for $615,000, which was all given to that charitable thing that was there. So Banksy, I love New York. Yeah, no doubt about it. He gave them an awful lot that day. This was an earlier one in Los Angeles. And again, a political statement. Notice these are crayons that make up the bullets along this thing here. So it's a cross purposes kind of thing. And I'm not sure what was going on in the world in 2011. We might have invaded somewhere, perhaps. So I think it's another political statement. And of course, he just has all kinds of stuff he puts out there and a whole range of stuff. And most recently in the news, it turns out that Bansky has bought this boat in the Mediterranean. And he said, you know, he called somebody up and he said, you know, like with everybody, every rich person with millions of dollars, I wanted to have a boat in the Mediterranean. So he bought this boat, but it's the Louise Michel, and it's already rescued migrants heading from North Africa to Europe when it encountered a dinghy packed with 130 people taking on water with more than 200 people aboard. The Louise Michel, a 101-foot former French patrol vessel, could not properly steer and so issued a distress call. An Italian Coast Guard vessel and humanitarian ship Sea Watch responded and took the migrants. So this is a picture of that happening. This happened in this last summer. And this is a little better picture of his rescue boat. Of course, he's got it decorated up with some of his things. And this is on the side of it. In that time, over 400 people died or went missing attempting the journey. So these are the extra ones coming in, and this is on his boat, and it's just not able to handle all of those. Okay, well, let's go. I'm sort of ending up here now. Let's go to the value that has been attributed to some of these things in a rather surprise thing that happened to this particular picture. This is a picture of Bansky, and you can recognize the little girl with her red balloon. It's a very popular symbolism that he has. And so we're at a high-level auction house. Everybody gets very dressed up because, you know, these are people that are able to bid hundreds of thousands of dollars for whatever. And Sotheby's has a very good reputation, as you'll see that flag hanging out. So inside, free drinks for everybody. I don't know how many people kind of try to crash that. They probably don't make it, but if you dress up well enough, maybe you do. I don't know. I doubt if it's invitation only, but I've never been to one, so I don't really know. I haven't researched it either. But everybody's having a good time and getting ready to bid a lot of stuff. And on this one, they end up having an estimate on the back of a girl with a balloon, and they estimate that it will go for 200 to 300,000 pounds, or US about $200 to $300,000, a little more. It turns out, however, that it went for 750,000 pounds, or almost $1 million United States dollars, just for this one single picture. Wow, that's quite a thing to hang in your hallway or wherever. Probably donate it to or loan it to a museum so a lot of people can see it. But there's more. There was a tricky guy sitting in the audience with a little electronic control. And that little electronic control got everybody's attention. Everybody hears this noise and they turn around and they look, because that $1 million picture is being shredded. Wow. He had a mechanism buried inside the frame.
Oh my God.
It's going to shred this. And he had a hacky in the audience that pushed the button that caused it to shred. I think the person that bought it for $1 million now has $1.5 million thing, because that's really unusual. And I think he's really lucky, because this picture with the final thing here, and you see these people turning around to look at it also, they're just amazed with what's happening here. This is taken while the auction, right after the auction, while this has come down here. But Bansky was disappointed as they take it away, that's the way it stayed. But he said, and you'll notice, when they did it as an experiment, it went all the way. So something jammed it. In rehearsals, it worked every time, all the way. So I think the person that got that picture with it stopped halfway down. That's even more better. So that's kind of neat, I think. Now, this is one of the last things, and this is, I think, the last slide I have, or close to it. Banksy in devolved Parliament, the highest auction price yet. 8 by 14 feet, 2009 satirical painting. If you've ever watched on television, this is similar to the British Parliament, where the people sit on each side, and there's a moderator up at the front, and people stand up at the dock here and they make their comments. This is the leader of the party, and the leader of the opposing party would be sitting here, and he might come up and reply here and so on. So anyhow, it's a very, very British kind of thing. That sold for $12.1 million. So from graffiti artist to gazillionaire and so on. That's right, the green thing. Share screen, this one. Share. And I guess what I need to do is get this. Okay, we're going to talk about Rothko now. And his view is pictures must be miraculous, not just any old thing. We're going to watch the evolution of his stuff. Uh-oh. Let me go back. I don't think yeah. Okay, I was at the beginning. Okay. Get things together here. Pictures must be miraculous. We'll see the evolution of his things. This is some unusual stuff that he had, but let's go back and take a little earlier look. You know, I've got the wrong one pulled up. Sorry about this, folks. I have the wrong file pulled up. One hour ago, that looks like the one. Yeah, this is the one. I have so many of these things, and I hate to throw anything out, but anyhow, here we go. This is Mark Rothko, and he's actually a Portland man, but let's get an idea of what the scale of his is. In this, you'll see that this is a Christie's auction, and this particular painting sold for $44 million. So he's an upscale kind of guy also. The final price ended up being $77.5 million. He migrated with his parents from Russia whenever he was 10 years old to Portland. They sailed over to New York City. They went immediately to Portland, where they had relatives already. Mark Rothko is regarded as one of the leading American artists of the 20th century. He lived from 1903 to 1970, and he began his life in art as Marcus Rothkowitz in Portland, Oregon. As we'll see later, he changed it to Rothko because one of the art gallery people in New York City, they had too many Jewish artists, so they didn't want to display his stuff. Okay, here's his uncle's store in Portland, Oregon. You can see the outfitting company up here, New York Outfitting Company. This is a view of the interior of that. They were in the clothing business. Rothko, here's Marcus Rothkowitz. He went to Lincoln High in Portland, and then went on. He had a scholarship in Yale. He was too politically active, however, and was too vocal for Yale, so he lost his scholarship after the first year. He struggled to earn money and stay at Yale, but then he dropped out after the second year. It was just too much of a struggle to make his tuition and living there and still hit the books and do well. These are just a couple of pictures of him. And we'll see a fair number of those. This is his first wife, who was 9 years younger. She was a successful jewelry artist, and she was really bothered by the fact that he went off and tried to do painting all the time. She wanted him to help her design and particularly make the jewelry and so on because she was successful. This is his second wife, also an artist, 18 years younger and not Jewish. And they had two children. Their daughter is still active and has written a lot of things and made commentary on Rothko's paintings and so on. And his son, Christopher Rothko, talks about the time he spent with him and has also published books and talks about this stuff. So they're two experts on Rothko material. For the Portland visit, when he was living in New York, he got married. He and his wife hitchhiked across country in 1932 from New York City to visit his family. He and his wife, however, camped in the hills near Portland. His family just didn't understand that. They had space for them, but he decided, no, they're going to live out in a tent in the woods. And they did that while they were here. And during that time, these are the kind of pictures that he came up with. Quite different than any of the later stuff that he did. And one of the things I want to try to do here is kind of follow his progression from these pictures to the things that we end up with today that we know as Rothko paintings. So let's get started. This was a Rothko. This is just to show you the signature in the lower left thing. I didn't just put those things together and throw them up here. Rothko had his first one-man show in Portland in Oregon in 1933 when he was 30 years old. A few months later, he had a one-man show in New York at the Contemporary Art Gallery. And for the first time, he showed oil paintings, 15 in all, mostly portraits. Those last paintings that I show you, of course, were watercolor kinds of paintings. Where we are all headed, okay? Just so you know, compared to the stuff we've seen in the past, we're going to make a long journey to get to these typical kinds of Rothkos, the ones that he's really known for, the ones that sell for millions of dollars. But anyhow, that's where we're headed. But let's go back and get started. This is the evolution of his style. This is watercolor on paper, and these are both untitled. He didn't put a lot of titles on most of his stuff, so most of this stuff is untitled. And with the squares, you'd think, okay, that especially untitled, but some of those he actually named. So anyhow, these are some of his early works. There's nothing remarkable there that I could see, but anyhow, he goes on. 1934, 1935, he seemed to get into the subway kind of scenario there a little bit. Family kinds of things, called Family in 1936. This is a self-portrait that he made in 1936. And throughout this period, he wasn't selling enough, so he was supporting himself as a teacher. He changed his name from Rothkowitz because a New York art gallery told him they already had too many Jewish artists. You do what you got to do. This is one I showed you before, untitled. He didn't give many titles, but this was 1937. So we're moving along pretty well. A lot of the things that he has, I don't really have dates for them. And a lot of them, he doesn't actually put dates on them. So even though there aren't dates on them, when I take them out of a book, very often the book will have a date that it was made, or a year at least. But even that's not very well complete at all. So these are some of the kinds of things that he was doing in the 30s. Here you can see some of these underground or subway kinds of things. Certainly that's a big issue in New York City. Subway's a big way to get around there. It's a bit stylized in the way he puts these things together, the long, thin things. I'm not an art critic. I don't know much about art, so I can't really critique them in any extent. More of these things, not very sharp colors, rather bland. Street Scene in 1937. Now I'll start moving ahead a little bit. These are some things that were also untitled, but have specific dates on them. And he's still very much into the figure thing, a little bit distorted, but figure things. That's kind of distorted for sure. 1940. It's hard to see where from this kind of thing, he ended up with just simple squares on paper. I mean, it just absolutely amazes me how you get there from here. But yeah, you might maybe think that was a Picasso he was copying. But things happen, and we move along our way, and he's becoming a little bit more abstract, at least, not necessarily so much the mother and child or the figures even, but into composition, and abstract material is starting to come along. Rothko was a member of a rabble-rousing group of artists in New York City. In the early 40s, New York City was sort of like Paris was to some of the 1870s and 80s and 1900s painters. And they got together a lot. And finally, particularly Rothko and Gottlieb, rattled the cage a little bit. And in New York City, in June 1943, they published got published in the New York Times a manifesto. It was with these artists, Mark Rothko and Adolf Gottlieb. This became known as the New York or Abstract Expressionist School. And they broke from the past and to an unknown world which can be explored only by those willing to take risks. A manifesto of sorts. The world of imagination is fancy-free and violently opposed to common sense. It is our function as artists to make the spectator see the world our way, not his way. We favor the simple expression of the complex thought. We are for a large shape because it has the impact of the unequivocal. We wish to reassert the picture plane. We are for flat forms because they destroy illusion and reveal truth. It is a widely accepted notion among painters that it does not matter what one paints as long as it is well painted. This is the essence of academicism. There is no such thing as a good painting about nothing. So that's a pretty strong manifesto, and it really caught on big time. No such thing as good painting about nothing. You know, those a little bit familiar with art might realize that this harkens back to Paris in 1874. There were a few people there, painters that defied the official salon. Back in Paris in 1864, if you were a painter, you submitted some paintings to the salon, and experts, so-called, would choose those which were worthy of being presented to the public in this big salon. They might have several hundreds of pictures that would be displayed, but since there were thousands that were trying to be displayed, they were selected out. There were painters that defied this official salon, and they became known as the Impressionists, a term coined in derision by a journalist, the Impressionist, the impression of the world out there, instead of specifically painting what it really is. But you may recognize some of these names: Monet, Renoir, Degas, Cézanne. Well, there's a new group in New York City: Helen Frankenthaler, Willem de Kooning. Not much touch with reality there, but you get a strong impression. Lee Krasner. Again, all top-notch painters now recognized as such. Jackson Pollock. I once had a painting like this, a copy, not a painting, I wish I did. I had a copy of his like this, and I really enjoyed it. It was just so colorful and interesting. Always fun to look at. This is Rothko's studio about this time, 153 East 69th Street in New York's Upper East Side. This is him inside his studio with a fairly rare picture. There are a couple of pictures of him, but never of him painting, really. He never let people watch him paint. His son talks about being a kid when he's, 4, 5, 6 years old or so, and he'd go and visit his father in the studio, and his father would play with him and show him things and do things and so on. But he never painted while his son was there. He never painted when there were people. Here's another one. We're starting on the trend now to just take a look at what his migration is from some of those other paintings to where he's going to get with these broad swatches of color. So I have a few examples here that I'll be showing as we migrate, and it's really hard for me to see how he moved from one to the other. This is Slow Swirl at the End of C, 1944, and it's subtitled Melt Ecstatic. Now, the comment has been made that this might be sort of representational of he and his wife. I don't see it myself. Maybe one thing is taller than the other, but that's about as far as it goes. But, what do I know? So anyhow, that's one of the things that has been suggested. A lot of this stuff is really quite different than what he was doing before. It's really become totally abstract in some sense. I don't see a flow or a combination particularly. It's certainly not a Van Gogh, or it's not some of these other impressionist kinds of things. And there is some similarity. I mean, there are some fine lines as well as some color shapes and so on. The palette is similar in many ways, but just interesting to look at. Here's another very colorful thing. Boggles the mind how they come up with this kind of stuff, but that's part of the evolution of an artist, and that's what they spend a lot of time studying. Austral image. Some of these have named, but very few. Most of them are just unnamed. And you just enjoy the pattern of colors and shapes that are there. The Rites of Lilith. I guess that refers back to some Greek or whatever, and I don't know what that means. So that doesn't have much meaning for me beyond just looking at the pretty pattern of things on the canvas. Now, in 1948, we're starting to see something that might give some glimmer of where he's going with all of this, but it's still just a glimmer. But let's go up here and read this. What I liked about Rothko was that there was no real sort of idea in the paintings. They were a presence, just pure abstraction. When I think about Rothko, it's color first. The exuberance, the luminosity, and the radiance of color that is so striking. I'm not much interested in the dark paintings. Rothko's sense of proportion shows in a painting, say, of a large yellow with white over it. A thin portion of black at the top of that has white over it mixed with gray, and a very much small black and red on the bottom with a little bit of color left around the edge. Paint application is also crucial. I admire Rothko's brushwork. With Rothko, you feel the way he caresses the canvas. His painting seems to absorb color and to glow. That was his statement in 1997. Now, some of that brush stroke and all that kind of thing, you really don't get that from looking at pictures in books and so on. That's the real advantage of going to a museum and being able to see these things up close. And I must admit that I forget how long ago they had a particular exhibition of Rothko here at the museum downtown. And they had a room or so of his, and I walked into that, and I was so uneducated, and I just looked at this stuff, and I said, and walked right on through to some other room. I really did not appreciate his stuff at all. I think now I will go down sometime and take a look at some. I think they have a few that they hang there, and if they have an exhibition again, I'll certainly go and spend a little more time, because you do have to spend your time soaking in front of his pictures in order to get the full essence of it. They say that time and again, and I believe it. It's true more and more. So anyhow, here is that one. Showed a little bit by itself, more isolated, so you can look at it a little bit more intensely. For me, it's a little too busy. I like his other things, which is where he's migrating, so we'll see. That was 1948. More of the same here. These also are pretty much similar to the one that he has here. This is not that dissimilar. Colors, of course, and whatever. How you decide to do which shape what, well, that's why you're an artist and I'm not. Here's an indication that's moving along now, 1949, magenta, black, green on orange. And one of the big things, we won't go at too much here, but if you're able to look at this in person, not only do you get a general picture impression, but also, and I think I have this shown later, the way these different color patches blend into each other, the type of brush strokes that are there, really have an impact on the impression that you get from the whole thing. And the layering and the whole overall impression. You don't get it until you're there and have a chance to get it. So I'm going to go through a whole series of these things to give you an impression of where he's moving from one to the other. I'm not sure there's a clear path, but there's a difference, and I try to keep the dates on them so you can see where we're migrating from one forward to another. 1954. I'm not sure that I'm able to see a real progression in a sense of, you know, bigger squares to bigger and bigger squares to bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger squares, anything of that sort. But certainly there's a maturity that is coming as you get toward the other ones. Not much I can say, just enjoy. I enjoy some of these a lot more than others. I suspect other people have different appreciation for different ones. Two very different kinds of paintings. I started to wonder, for instance, with the fields of black up here, we know he's going to end up toward these black canvases at the end. Whether this is a start of that kind of thing, because I hadn't noticed black particularly in some of the other paintings before, but here it's 1954, maybe it's starting to creep in a little bit. That's just my guess. Just patches of color without any real definitive edges to them, except the edge of the canvas. One of the things that's a big issue with Mark, and shows his sort of political leanings or his attitude about society and all of that. There was a Seagram corporate headquarters that was going to be put up in New York City. And Mies van der Rohe was to design the tower, the structure. He was the architect for the overall. And then Philip Johnson designed the interior of this structure. Really a major New York building was going to be put up. He hired Rothko, that is Philip Johnson hired Rothko to make paintings to populate the smaller of two dining spaces to decorate the upscale Four Seasons restaurant, a more intimate private dining space. Rothko spent most of 1958 and some of 1959 executing three distinct but related series of murals for it. Now, these are not paintings, these are series of murals, so there were several in each one of these things. So here's the Seagram's Four Seasons restaurant. In 1958, the commission of $35,000 is equivalent, according to the inflation calculator, to $320,000 in 2020. Now, he spent a whole year putting these things together, but for him, I'm sure that was a pretty significant amount of money. So anyhow, he and his wife came back from Europe, and they came to visit this place, and these are the kinds of paintings that he had put up to be in that Four Seasons restaurant. So he was still very much in the style that he was before, and he made a series of many paintings to go into this. After returning from Europe to New York, Rothko and his wife Mel visited the nearly completed Four Seasons restaurant. Upset with the restaurant's dining atmosphere, which he considered pretentious and inappropriate for the display of his works, Rothko refused to continue the project and returned his cash advance to Seagram & Sons Company. Wow. Refused a lot of money for a whole year's work. Seagram had intended to honor Rothko's emergence to prominence through his selection, and his breach of contract and public expression of outrage were unexpected. It just kind of blew him away. I mean, these are the forefront in architectural design and interior design, and they got blown off by this guy who thought so little of their upscale space that he wouldn't allow his things to be hung and returned all the money. There's a play that was made primarily about this, Red, a play about Rothko withdrawing from Seagram's restaurant mural commission as an inappropriate place for his murals to be seen. It's about Rothko and his life and so on, but it really focuses mostly on the murals. It premiered in London, December 1959, and it was in New York premiere March 11th, 2010. And it got a 2010 Tony Award for Best Play, so that's doing pretty well. This is the fellow who did the play. It was read by John Logan, 2009, focused on the Seagram restaurant drama, but it has some other background also, I'm told. The first words of the play, "What do you see?" So he goes into one of these big things, you know, he walks out on stage and he asks the audience, "What do you see?" That was the whole thing of all of these huge murals. What do you see? What's the impact on you? Okay, let's continue a little bit more now with style and see what they have to say. 1958, 1961. I'm reading maybe into it because I know where we're going to go. I'm seeing these black areas and some of this stuff darker. 1962, that was 58, 61. Now we're up to 62 and 67. It's not as bright in color overall as some of his other things had been. Frankly, I like the brighter stuff. I'm not into this lesser stuff or the darker things. And so here we are now with 1968, and I threw this one, 1969 in untitled, oil on paper on linen. I mean, I think I could do that. But I'll bet if they sold that at auction, it would be a little more than I would be able to get. I don't know, Giza, what do you think? Maybe I should make one of those and put it on our wall and forge his name across the bottom. We'll go upscale. It turned out that he got a commission to do paintings for a chapel, which was he was in New York, but the chapel was going to be put up in Texas. I'll show you that a little bit later. The chapel had not been finished. It had only been designed, though, so he knew what the spaces would be inside that. So what he did in New York City was set up those spaces inside his studio so that he would have the same kind of thing to work with, so that he would have a feel for how these different paintings interacted with each other when they would be placed within this chapel down in Texas. So here he is in his New York thing, setting up these things and starting to paint these black canvases. This is the Rothko Chapel, which will be actually dedicated and opened February 28, 1971. But it turns out that Rothko committed suicide February 25th, 1970. In 1968, Rothko was diagnosed with mild aortic aneurysm. He was 66 years old. And it turned out that on the day that he committed suicide, the Seagram murals that he had given away arrived at the Tate Gallery in London the day that he died. Now, it turns out that he had this aneurysm, so he was not able to do nearly as much as he had done in the past. He did not raise his arms above his shoulders, so he worked on smaller canvases, never more than a few feet in size. None of the big stuff that he had before where he would have to reach over his head and so on. And then finally, that was too much. Let's see whether I have anything more. No, let me tell you. What happened with his suicide was he was getting rather depressed with all of this. And so finally, he loaded himself with drugs. And then He was, and then slit a big vein in his left arm and bled to death. He was found lying on the floor by the janitor that comes in to help him do things and clean up things and so on. It was really quite a surprise to everyone, even those close to him. A legal conflict resulted from the 800 plus paintings he left after his death. 800, wow. Soon the remaining work was divided among various museums throughout the world, as well as the Rothko family members. In 2004, a Rothko painting, untitled, 1956, went for $8.3 million. Okay, let's go and examine the Rothko Chapel a little bit more. It's in Texas, located in this location. There's no charge to go in. What you see here is what you get. And these are the canvases that he painted to fit in this space. And as you can see, there's a lot of very sparse bench. These are all movable. They use this as a meeting space and so on. We'll see a little bit later. And outside there's a reflecting pool. But for the most part, this is the interior. And there's no charge to go into this. It's a chapel. People come in and sit, and they might sit there for quite a long period of time. His son has said that he's gone in and he just sits for hours, letting this stuff seep into him. You can see from this picture, there's a little bit of variation in the color between the panels and even in different parts of the panel. I wasn't able to get too many good pictures of that kind of stuff, but there is some texture to it. But it's pretty vague. I mean, I'm not educated enough artistically to be able to appreciate these things. I just have to go and spend time close to his things. We had a friend in England who was interested in another great artist and good reproductions and so on. And some of the major works were there in some of the British museums. And he talked about going and sitting beside some of his favorite paintings, but particularly by this artist. And he would sit there for an hour or two. I mean, I guess I'm naive. How much more can you absorb about a picture with an hour or two? Well, apparently it works for a lot of people. And I would imagine he's up close to this panel for a reason. He's perceiving a certain way. Certainly you can sit back, and many other people do sit further back. It's a different experience. You can see also here slight variations. Now, how much something like this is in the lighting and how much this is in the lighting or how much it's in the panel, that's really difficult to tell. It's widely used. They do sponsor things in there. Here's music. Here's also music. It also looks like they have religious things. A choir, probably another religious service in here. I don't really know. Here's this woman sitting to the side and enjoying it from a different aspect. This gives a bit of an overview down here. This one gives a bit of an overview of what the lighting is from above, as well as all these other light things. So I'm sure every time of day, the lighting in this is rather different. Here's somebody sitting right in front of these panels in a different thing, different location. Here's just another view. And we're getting pretty close to the end. It was placed September 16, 2000. The Rothko Chapel was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Mark Rothko's funeral stone. And of course, there are a lot of rocks that are laid there. Very often the tradition is to come, and if you visit the website, you leave a stone behind. with respect of the person that's passed away there. He has been honored by his native country with his postage stamp, 1970. There have been 2 postage stamps in the United States. This is number 12, 1951, U.S. postage in 1998. And this was orange and yellow, 1956. It was one of many on a postage sheet. It was published in 2010. I think they're kind of neat. I like these brighter of his books rather than the darker or the black ones, gray ones. Works on canvas, 836 recorded ones. November 3rd, untitled, sold for $7.2 million. 1950, 2007, it sold at auction for $72.8 million. May 2015, a yellow and blue, sold for only $46.5 million. He's clearly in the stratosphere. There's been some talk about having, since he's a local Portland boy, a Rothko pavilion. They received a historic $10 million gift toward the $50 million cost of this pavilion in the downtown Portland Art Museum. And it would like go across this. Notice there's a freeway. There's this outside pavilion where they have some external art. And there is a walkway that goes through this to the next street. And it would connect across this in the 2 wings of the museum, like this. But one of the problems that people bring up is that it would block the throughway path. And that's one of the contentious issues now about putting this construction in. So how that's gonna be resolved, I think is still a little bit up in the air at this point. At least I haven't seen anything written about that recently. Just another view of the Rothko throughway. A little bit what it would like to on the inside. This is all, of course, artist's construction, not a real construction. Some of his famous works. Quite a range, from the 30s to present day, well through the 50s to present day. And of course, you can buy all kinds of Rothko lookalikes online. Choose what you like. You can get this for only $37. And you can get these, whether they're printed on paper, you can get real canvas ones. You can get a range of sizes. It's all a matter of what you want to pay and what you want to position in your viewing area. This is a separator, so that's all, folks. So that's pretty much it. So I'm going to stop the share.